Good evening, everyone.
Kodesh Tov, Kavod Harav. How are you?
Kodesh Tov, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so we did Dalid. I think we did also Hey. Let's go to Vav. So said the tour that if you have a child, who doesn't know how to speak yet, too young, so it's okay if the child is in the room. So regarding that, says Bet Yosef, Ken Katav Ravad, so it says in Ravad, Besefer Bal Nefesh, this book called Nefesh, Beshara Prisha, over there in this chapter. וכתב ורמיזה המילתא בפרק הרבה פסחים. So he says, where's the allusion to this? In פסחים ק"י"ב עמוד ב' בעניין המשמש במיטה שהתינוק ישן עליה, right? So talks about it over there regarding this case where person is having relations with his wife and the child is sleeping on the same bed. So right over there we learned that if the child is very young, and doesn't know how to speak yet, so then it is okay. Then he goes on. So he says also another thing, which is that if this person or whatever is sleeping, then it's okay because he doesn't notice what's going on. גם זה בספר בעל נפש, it's also there in בעל נפש, לרבד, ודקטק כן מדקאמר בפני משמע נאור כאמר, אבל ישן מותר. Yeah, so we learned from the Rabbi there, בעל נפש. So it goes on. בית שיש בו ספר Torah, right? Another thing is that, as we mentioned already, a house which has a sefer Torah room, right? You're not allowed to have relations there. So what you have to do is make a partition there, right? 10 tfachim, which is about waist high. So if you have a different room to put it in, so then you have to put it in the other room, right? Because it's more respectable. The Sopek Mishemeto, right? It's over there in this parak, Chav Vav Amud Aleph. Katvu Tosot says Tosot there, Dafka Sefer Torah. He says that's only talking about Sefer Torah. Begam bechumashin, also chumash. Yesh lachamir, so you should be stringent. He says. Kimo Sefer Torah, just like Sefer Torah, right? So, but just to to explain to you, the chumash that he's talking about is not our chumash. What's the difference? So their chumash was like, first of all, it was written on a scroll, and number two, it was also handwritten. But our chumash is not handwritten. It is like photocopies, or laser print, something like that. So it's not the same thing. So he says, right, that should be stringent with the chumash, their chumash, not ours, right? But anyway, he says, but when it comes to other books, so he says the sharp is fine. Dan, but you could just put like one cover over it, right? That's good enough. Cover it. But again, right, our books is a little bit different because they're not handwritten. Not the same thing. So what does it matter if it's handwritten or not? What does that have to do with it? Because it's the writing that sanctifies the book. So therefore, if it's not handwritten, and it was just a photocopy or it was laser or like bubble jet print, one of those things, right? The thing is that those things are not really called writing. They're not writing, because they're done in like a very like unorthodox way. It's not like handwritten kind of style. 500 years ago, when the printing press came out, right, and that's when it was invented, right, in those days. So there was a machloket between the authorities, where their printing is like writing or it's not regarding this, issue. So there was some who were stringent with that. There were some who were lenient. The I think the Taz, if I'm not mistaken, was stringent about it. Yeah, and there was a Pri Chadash who was lenient about that. He said it's not really called writing, but that was there, where it was like, in those days the printing press was like very mechanical, not really, the way we have it today, set up computerized, and right, not exactly the same thing. So meaning what? That they were like doing it with their hand, it was still some hand motions involved there. Nowadays, everything is computerized, right, and automatic. It's all programmed and whatever, right? All kind of that stuff. So therefore, it's not really the same thing at all. So therefore, there's room to be lenient, with our books today, which are not really written by hand or, even like it's not even like the old-fashioned type of the typing. It's something else altogether. There are some books that have written this already, some poskim that have made this distinction. So therefore, right, we can be lenient. But of course, when it comes to Sefer Torah, right, which was written by hand, obviously, right? Because also you have these these fake Sefer Torah, like these, like it's like a souvenir. It's like it's not really handwritten, it's just it just looks like a Sefer Torah, but it's really, just basically some kind of a right souvenir. That's what it is, right? It's not the real thing. So therefore, probably with that also we can be lenient, more obviously than these things. Okay, so that's a story. So if you do have a sefer, so therefore, if you have just like regular books, you don't really need anything. You could just you could ignore it. But if you have things like we talked about, so then you got to be a little bit more careful. Then we also have to talk about tefillin, right? What about tefillin? What happens with that? So Bezat Hashem, I think we're going to get to in a second. But anyway, right, that's the story there. אבל שאר ספרי קודש בחומשים כיוון שאין עשויים בגלילה, סגי לו בכלי. Al kli, right? So, the Rosh Katav, but the Rosh says, right, that you should do double cover, right, with these books, one over another. One utensil with another utensil, right, or some kind of bag, whatever it is, right? Two bags, two pouches, right, whatever you got there. Then he goes on, עד כאן, ואפשר שישבו התוספות חומשים לספר תורה בחומשים העשויים בגלילה דווקא, right? So he says, Bit Yosef also points that out. So he said, that which Tosfot said, that chumashim are like Sefer Torah, that's talking about the ones that are made, right, with parchment, right, with a scroll. But not the ones that we have today. It's not the same thing at all. Okay, interesting. That's the story there. Goes on. Okay, now we're going to get to tefillin, right? ואם יש בו תפילין או ספרים אפילו לא של תלמוד אסור עד שיתנם בכלי בתוכלי, right? So it says, right, when it comes to tefillin, it should be a bag, right, inside a bag, double bag. You got to double bag it. Same thing also when it comes to, like, holy, artifacts, right, whatever, holy items, like mezuzah, right, all kinds of things like that. I'm not talking about the mezuzah you have in your door, because that's already covered as it is. So you don't really need much there. Also, the door covers it. When you close the door covers it. So that's also another reason. So therefore, right, nobody touches the mezuzah when you're having relations, with your spouse. Nobody does anything with that. But when it comes to tefillin, you should have a bag within a bag, right? Double bag. Or you can just put it into the closet, right? With one bag, it's also good. I put it into a chest or whatever, right? Drawer, whatever you got there. And as long as it's covered, double, right? One bag, one drawer, one this, whatever, all the combination. But there is a condition on this. What is the condition? The caveat. It says that but a second one should not be designated especially for that item. Right? Just a regular, general, right, bag, whatever. But if it's designated for that, so then even if it's 100, it's considered like one. So at least one of those bags should be something which is not designated for that item only. Okay. Good. So then he goes on, but Yosef here. דין התפילין פשוט שם מתבר בסימן מן, ודין הספרים שאינם עשויים בגלילה, כבר כתבתי בסמוך שדעת התוספות והראש להשוותן לתפילין. So as we said, right, that those books, which are handwritten, they're the same as tefillin. So what does that mean? They need like a double cover, right? Double bag, whatever. וזה לשון הרב"ד, this is what it says in הרב"ד, בספר בעל הנפש. בית שיש בו תפילין או חומשים או נביאים וכתובים אסור לשמש בו עד שיתנם כלי בתוכלי. He also says, right, the רב"ד, you got to put double. ויהיה העליון כלי שאינן כליין. But the top one, right, the outer one should be something which is not, especially for that. כגון גלימה ילווה כקומטרה. Right, so he says that, like, for instance, you have two different types of garments, right, whatever, something like that. ועכשיו שניתנה התורה שבא פה להיכתב, so he says now that the oral Torah has been allowed to be written down, משום עת לעשות לאדוני, because we can't remember everything. Av Sifrei Talmud Kemo Ken. So it's the same thing also applies to Talmud books. Tzricha Kisui, right? So, but as we said, here we're talking about handwritten things, right? But things which are photocopies and laser. So there, the truth is, they don't have really sanctity, these things. So they're not considered to be holy. They're just a mitzvah item matter, items, right? They're mitzvah items, but they're not holy items. Okay, so there are several books that talk about that. There's Mishpatei Uziel, there's Safnat Paneach, there's Halacha Brura. Several books that write about these things. Okay, so anyway, right, good. So he says, also you can do like this, right? Put it into like a chest, and then cover the chest with a talit, right? Some kind of blanket, and then you're good. It's like a double, you have a double thing there. But here's the thing, right? Just to explain to you, this double thing that we just mentioned, it doesn't work with the Sefer Torah. It only works with these books and tefillin and things like that. But when it comes to Sefer Torah, either you have to make a partition, or you gotta take it out of the room, remove it. So but I think that a yeah, well, I'm gonna be slow to say this, but I'll hesitate with that a little second. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch and see what it says there, and then I'll come back to that idea. Just want to make sure I'm not making a mistake. Okay, so it says here. Yeah, so it says here in the Shulchan Aruch, אסור לשמש מיתתו בפני כל אדם אם הוא נאור. You're not allowed to have relations, right, when there's somebody there in the room, right? Some third party, if he's awake. ואפילו על ידי הפסק מחיצה הסרה, even if you make a partition, they won't help you. ובפני תינוק שאין יודע לדבר, but it says if you're talking about a child which cannot speak yet, mutar, you're allowed. But שיש לו ספר תורה או חומשים. So as we said, right, if you have ספר תורה or חומשים, ha'asuim begilila, which are made, he says, right, with a scroll. As we said, right, asur shamesh bo, you're not allowed to have relations there. Ad sheyeh befanav mechitza, until you put there, right, some kind of partition, as we said. So you need a partition. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then it goes on. But if he has a different room to put it in, right, that's better, right? As we said, preferable. Asur ad sheyotzena, that you should put it there. Ve'im yesh bo tefillin or sefarim, or if he has tefillin or books, afilu shel gemara, even if it's gemara, asur la ad sheitanem bekli betochli. You have to put it into a double bag, whatever, a double thing there, double wrap. Ve'u shelo yeh hasheni miyuchad lahem, but the second one should not be specifically for that item. אבל אם הוא מיוחד להם, but if it's specific with that item, אפילו 100 כאחד חשיבה, then even 100 is going to be like one. ואם פירש טלית על גבי ארגז, so he says if you put a טלית on top of the chest, right, חשוב בכלי בתוך כלי. So that would be fine, that would be like a two, double. That would be considered to be double. So what I wanted to say, before we started this is that what about if you have a Sefer Torah and you put it into a closet, right? How does that work? Or let's say you put it into a large chest, right? Something like that. Um, or some kind of a right little something like that cubby, right? Some kind of cupboard, right? How does that do the job? So apparently, right? I think that that would be considered like a partition. Why is that? Because it's a different domain there, in the closet. I think that's pretty clear, It has to be, it will be considered to be a different domain. But I think it really depends on the size. In other words, if it's a closet where, it's like large, relatively speaking, like a separate domain, so that would be considered to be a separate room. So that should do the job because you just click close the door, and that would do it. Let me see if the Mishnah Berurah here talks about this. Interesting. Let's take a look. Yeah, so Mishnah Berurah here says that if it's just a chest, that would not do the job, right? And I think he's right about that. Why is that? Because a chest is not really a different domain. It's just basically right in the same room. But I think a closet would do the job because a closet is already like a different domain. Like, our American closets, right, which are in the wall, whatever, something like that, right? I think that would do the job. Yeah, it needs to be checked a little bit, right? In other words, the question is like this: what size is considered to be a separate domain? In other words, what is the size limit there? That's what I'm interested to see. I got to look into that a little bit. It's a good question. Anyway, I'm looking here more at the Mishnah Berurah here. What he says? Uh, all right, yeah. So we got but it seems to me that as a closet would be considered like a different domain. All right, we'll check that. Bezat Hashem, we'll take a look at that. I don't see the Mishnah Berurah because in the times of Mishnah Berurah, they didn't have closets like that, like we have today. It's something like relatively new. So, okay. But he also makes another point over here, Mishnah Berurah, right? Which he says that if you have, let's say, like some shelves, right, and you have some books there on the shelves, and what you want to do is like cover it, with some kind of a right, some kind of a curtain, or something to just hang it over. So he says that wouldn't be enough. Why? Because you need two coverings, right, for those books. So as we said, right, we're talking about handwritten. Okay, so haha. Okay, looks like I found my answer over here. Oh. When you look hard enough, you find it. So here he says in the Mishnah Berurah in Lamed Gimel, look what he says, right? Exactly what I was asking about. So he says, if the chest is large enough that it holds 40 se'ah, right? So he says that would be, right, one amma squared with a height of 3 amot. That's like a separate domain already. Oh, that's what he says. So you wouldn't have to cover it again with anything else. That would be enough. But it's as if it's connected right to the wall with nails, then he says you can be definitely lenient, right? According to all opinions. So you see from there, right? This is what I was looking for. That if you have a closet, that's good for Sefer Torah. That would do the job. Because a closet definitely has these measurements, right? So what are we talking about? What are the measurements here, right? 1 amma by 1 amma, so that's like 1 amma is like half a meter, So we're talking about like 1.5 feet squared, which is not really big at all. Most closets are bigger than that, right? And then you have 3 amot height, right, which would be like 1.5 meters. So yeah, a closet would definitely cover that size. So that would mean you could put the Sefer Torah in there. Okay, good. I'm happy now. I'm happy now. Okay. All right. So yeah. So this is the size that it needs to be for that purpose. Otherwise, if it's not that size, it's considered to be part of the room, the domain of the room that it's in. So therefore, for the Sefer Torah, that wouldn't be enough. Good, beautiful. Okay, wow. All right. What else can you ask for? So let's go back to our discussion here. So we finished Vav. Let me just see if we finished everything here. Yeah, I think we did it. Okay. So let's go on here. All right, so this is also very important, interesting also. Interesting and important. You'll be glad to know about this one. Okay, so so it says the Torah like this: right? You should do this deed, right? It says with some kind of fear and trepidation. Don't do it in the beginning of the night or the end of the night. Right? That's what it says. It says פרק ואלו נדרים, שאלו לאמם שלום, שאלו, they asked this woman, right? They asked, there was some lady there. אשתו של רבי אליעזר. This was the wife of Rabbi Eliezer. טעות סופר יש כאן, right? So it says, but Yosef, okay, we got to see this inside the Torah. This whole thing there. We got to see it inside. Okay, so I'm going to read this too, right? There's a lot of things here, a lot of interesting things. So it says, V'itanabi Masechet Kala. It says also Masechet Kala, Ma yaseh adam b'yu lo banim yaseh chatzei shemayim. What should a person do if he wants to have children who are, God-fearing, right? Doing the will of God, right? V'chofnei ishto, v'chatzei ishto, and also, I'm sorry, yeah, I didn't say it right. What should a person do if he wants to have sons, right? Sons. Do the will of heaven and do the will of your wife. So what does that mean? Do the will of heaven. Right? Give tzedakah, give a charity to the poor. Right? Also do the will of your wife. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ifatenu b'shat tashmish. Yeshua Omer, Samachenu b'dar v'adam mitzvah. So we already said these things, right? That be warm with her, at the time of intercourse. And also, right, give her whenever she wants. חפצי אשתו ולשמחה זו, בכל שעה שהיא צריכה, על כן תיסרו שתהיה שמאל דוחה, פן תעשיתנו לעבור על המידה הזאת ותמשיכהו אחרי לבלי עולם. Right, so, as we said, right, don't go too far with your wife. In other words, if she's a little bit too, spoiled, she wants it all the time, day and night, right, non-stop. So, you got to put an end to it, you got to make a border, a border, a red line. Can't go too crazy, as we said, right? ויהיה צנוע בשעת תשמיש ובסתר כיתת בנידה פק כל יד דברים הקדוש ברוך הוא סונן באחד מיני כל המשמש מיתתו לפני כל חי רב מקרקע גזה. We already said these things, we read these things already. I'm not going to go over it again. רב יהודה לשמאל רבינו בפני הבחרים. Right, so it says right, so as we said, right, this is where we're going now. This is where we are up to. So it says, when you have relations with your wife, says it too, right? Don't do the beginning of the night or the end of the night. Rather, you should try to do it around midnight, right? אפילו פירוש מספר עם עסקי תשמיש, או כשהוא מספר מגלה טפח ומכסה טפח, ודומה כמי שכפאו שד, פירוש שעושה הדבר באימה וביראה כאילו כפאו שד. So let's see the bit Yosef on that. We'll come back to the tour. There's a lot more here in the tour to read. We got to read a lot more things here. But anyway, right, as we said, so says Beit Yosef, Taut Sofer Yeshkan. There's a mistake over here in the text. Ki eno mitperek elu nedarim ela perek elu mutarin. So it's a different Gemara than the one that's quoted. כתב רב"ד, יש מפרשים מגלה טפח ומכסה טפח שלא היה ממרק כל העבר בשעת התשמיש עד שהוא מגלה רק טפח ממנו מכסה מיד לאחר תשמיש כדי למעט הנאתו. Right, so the Rabbah here brings all kinds of customs, which are like very pious customs. Meaning to say that he says here, that it's a mitzvah to diminish, your pleasure, and do all kinds of things like that, not to show the whole body and so forth and so on. But the truth is, I have to tell you, according to the Kabbalah, it's brought down in Sefer Kaf HaChaim, right? He says that not like that. According to the Zohar also, right? It says in the Zohar also that when a person has intercourse, with his spouse, so what's the best way to do it? The best way is that they should be totally naked, no clothing, right? But they should be covered with a blanket. This is the best way to do it. So, we're going to consider, right, that's the best method, But the Ravad here brings there also other things, here, like other methods, which are not really according to the Kabbalah, more like, like wearing clothing, and not exposing too much of your body and so forth and so on, right? Which seems to be like a little bit, like unnatural, for some people, whatever. It's hard for them to imagine such a thing like that. But the truth is, it depends on your character, it depends on your, on your personality. But anyway, the best thing is like that they're all naked and they're covering themselves with a blanket. And it says also in the Zohar something which is a little bit hard to do, not easy for everybody. But it says also the blanket should be also covering the head as well. That's not easy to do. But anyway, right? I'm just telling you, and then it's your choice, right? What you want to do with all this stuff. Because, the truth is these things are not really halakha, they're more like, piety, right? Things like this. Another thing he says here, right, in the name of the Rabbad is that, there were some rabbis also who were stringent, about these things, to do it like very quickly, and not to take too much time, because it's too much pleasure, blah, 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 right? So denying themselves of all kinds of, pleasures, whatever, right? Again, this is not halakha, these things, but it is like saintliness, really, all kinds of things like that. Yeah. But then, ואף על פי שיש בעניין זה עניין צניעות עיקר כוונתו לכך הייתה דוגמת המעשה הזה אמור גם בגמרא דברי מרמה ברבי יוסי ברבי חלפתא ושכנס את יבמתו 5 בעילות ויתבע בדרך חסדין ובאותו עניין הוא לא היה אלא כדי שלא תהא כוונתו אלא לשם מצווה בלבד. עד כאן ישנו. Okay, so also I want to tell you another thing, right, which is brought down I wanted to mention this thing here. Okay, it slipped my mind, but I'll come back to it. So anyway, right, let's go to the Shulchan Aruch and see what it says. So, as we said, it says in Shulchan Aruch that a person should try to have intercourse, right? Not in the beginning of the night or the end, not at the end of the night. So why is that? So according to the simple meaning, right? It says over here, "Kadesh lo yishma kol bnei adam be'avor lechashov b'shachar," because you may come to hear people's voices, right, and then think about another woman. Ela be'emtza layla. So what's the best thing to do in the middle of the night, right? But according to the Kabbalah, you should know here also, right? There's a Kabbalah here. So according to the Kabbalah, the truth is, right, that before midnight is not good to have relations with your wife. And the reason is because it says there that this brings down, a soul which is not so pure, which is like a reincarnated soul, which has all kinds of issues, problems. So therefore, in order to save that yourself from that problem, what you want to do is wait till midnight, and then after midnight, right? If you impregnate your wife, so then the soul that will come down will be a higher level soul. I remember my Rabbi Maran, he used to talk about this. One time he spoke about this, and he said that sometimes people find their children very disappointing. Not very spiritual. Very mediocre. Their children. So he says this is the reason why, because they don't wait till midnight. That's what he told us. And so you can see from there that it's an important thing, right? So the best thing to do is like this, right? If you want to have the most pure child, right? You want to do it on Shabbat and also after midnight, right? That's like the best scenario. So then you're going to get like a really good, soul, right? Something special, very holy soul there. But if you don't have all those ingredients, so it won't be on that high level like that. But what you don't want to do, right? The worst scenario is to do it on a weeknight, and also before midnight. That would be like you're looking for problems. That's what. Of course, we're talking here about right that you're having children, right? Because if you're not, so then we're not going to be so stringent about these things, maybe, perhaps, right? But if you are having children, then if you're looking to have children, this is the way to do it, right? Wait till midnight, and on Shabbat it's even better. But weekday and before midnight, you're not in a good place there. Okay? And there's something that's even worse than that, which is that having relations in the daytime, So if you impregnate your wife, in the daytime, what's going to be is, you're going to get like not such a good soul from there. A reincarnated soul with all kinds of issues, All kinds of issues he's going to have, this guy. So you don't want that, right? You want to have a child that'll make you happy, right? Who'll, make you proud that you're the parent of such a child like that. How do you do that? By following these instructions, right? That we're giving you here. So we already talked about the 9 things, right? Which the problems that we spoke about last week. And then there's also positions which are not really so desirable, right? As we said, we talked about that yesterday. So now we're talking about the timing, right? The timing is also very crucial. So all these things you see, right, influence the character of the child. So now you know what to do, right? Okay, we still have some more things to cover here, but that's the way it goes. Okay, so yeah. So what you want to do, as we said, right, is to wait till midnight. We're talking about the halachic midnight, right? Which you have to check on your calendar, right? When is the midnight according to halacha in your area? Let's say for now, right? We're in daylight savings, So over here in my area, it's gonna be like 5 minutes to 1, midnight. And then as we go towards the winter, it'll become like around 12 o'clock because we're gonna go to standard time. So that's the way it goes. Okay, good thing. These are very important things to know. Believe me when I tell you. Don't underestimate, right, the importance of these things. So now we're going to cover, right, all these things that we talked about with the Ravad, right, here in the Shulchan Aruch here. So it says, right, as we said, right, a person should have relations, in a fearful way. כמו שכתב על רבי אליעזר שהיה מגלה טפח ומכסה טפח, ודומה לו שכתב שד. So, right, so Rabbi Eliezer was very, right, stringent about the way he did it. Perush be'ema u'bira keilu kefa'o shed, right? So he was like, did it like in a way that, as if he was afraid, he was like being threatened by a demon. ויש מפרשים מגלה טפח ומכסה טפח שלא היה ממלק העבר בשעת תשמיש. So some say, right, it also means here that he wouldn't, right, how do you say this in English? Like he wouldn't, go back and forth, like, right, during the intercourse. He would just like stand still, In other words, he wouldn't pump, he would just stand still. That's the way he did it. So this is very unusual, for us. I mean, we don't understand things like this, but that's, these saintly people, this is the things that they did. Right? So it's going to be like he's doing it, against his will. He's being forced by it. Right? אותה לצורך תשמיש ועכשיו מכסה אותה, כלומר שלא היה מעריך באותה מעשה, also that means that they need to do quickly, ודומה לו כמו שבעיתו השד, it's like, he was forced, he was frightened by a demon, ונבעט וניח המעשה, כל כך היה מקצר בתשמיש, so he would do it like in a short way, very brief, to diminish his pleasure. ויש מפרשים מגלה טבח על הסינר שהיה חוגרת בו, שהפשט תשמיש היה מצליחה לחגרה, ומגלה רק טפח ממנו, right? So in other words, here also he's saying, right, that he wouldn't expose the whole body, he would leave only the part which needs to be exposed for the intercourse, but not more than that. מכסה מידי כדי למעט הנאתו. Why is all these things, what's the reason for all these things? To diminish his pleasure, right? So these are saintliness, these are not halakha. I have to tell you, right? So don't now come tell people, oh yeah, Rabbi told me like this, and then, this is halakha. It's not the halakha, these things. But these are, extra things, extra credit, So you get extra credit on a test, That's what they are. Yeah. Okay. So good. The cool through. So it says all these things, are relevant. They're all pertinent. So he says a person who's, like very, holy, right? Stringent, whatever. He's very, spiritual. You should be careful with these things. Interesting, right? That's the interesting thing. So, okay, that's the story, right? So, in other words, basically, right, the general rule here, whatever you see people doing today, right, in the Western world, do just the opposite. If I tell you that, right, then you understand everything. Because it's just the opposite of what they do, right? The Goyim, in the Western world, just the opposite of what they do. So okay. So yeah, there's still more to cover, but yeah, what I wanted to tell you, and before we stop, is that even though here it says, right, in the Shulchan Aruch, that this rabbi, used to do it like quickly, to get it over with, but the truth is that it says in the Talmud a little bit differently, right? It says there that if you want to have sons, right, as opposed to daughters, so what you should do is, make it longer, right? Why? Because if you want your wife, to first, to be the one to have the right, what do they call that, right? The right, I forgot the name, whatever it is, but you want your wife to do it first, right, and then you. Right? Climax, right? You know what I'm saying, right? You want your wife to climax first, and then you. And if that happens like that, in that order, then it's going to be a son, right? But if you climax first, right, and then your wife's going to be a daughter. So according to that, you're supposed to do it longer, right? And also doing it twice is also good, because this way, right, you'll climax last. So the Gemara asks a question, right? In other words, which one is the right one? This seems to contradict what we just said now, right? Which one is the right thing? So he says, it's all L'Shem Shemaim. In other words, if your intention is L'Shem Shemaim, for the sake of heaven, and so then they're going to give you a son. If you can't do that to go the long route, to go long, right? If you can't do that, you're not you don't have the technique for that, right? You're a quickie guy, you're quick, right? So if you're a quickie, so then as long as your intention is Hashem Shemaim, Hashem will help you. But if you have the self-control and you can hold it out and let your wife climax first, so then you'll have a son like that. If you're skilled enough to do that, if you have the proper control. There's still a lot more to discuss. We're going to Bezat Hashem. We'll continue, right? Hopefully, we'll finish up with this week, Bezat Hashem. And then we'll shift gears and go into something else there. Bezat Hashem. So okay, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak Baruch Laila Tov Chodesh Tov. Right, time to do Teshuvah. Rosh Chodesh Elul. Bezat Hashem. So we'll see you tomorrow night. Laila Tov.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
God bless.